and welcome to another episode of the Candice and Elisa Show. Today's headline, I'm actually super excited about, Elisa, and it is actually the brand Unilever, and they have decided to drop the word normal from all their beauty products. And of course, they're responsible for multiple beauty product productions. And they've decided that they will not be airbrushing to the extent they've been airbrushing their models in their adverts. I think that is huge. I mean, because as you were saying, I mean, what has normal skin actually been? I think I've grown up with it, so I never actually questioned it. But now that they've done it, I'm like, yeah, do that.
Yeah, I think the whole concept of normal applied to skin, to anything in terms of humanity, is very bizarre because, everything is so, it's like art. It would be so relative, but we have tended to gravitate towards the normal look of being white, the Caucasian, pristine, and it's only in recent years that models have started being plus sizes, and we've started embracing freckles, and we've started embracing all these different things that are not considered normal yet. So certainly I think it's something that pushing and striving to be more inclusive about is really paramount. How it's going to actually happen and at what speed, when somebody says we're going to airbrush less, I mean, when you shoot one person that looks like a Barbie, are we going to land somewhere in between those two, or are we going to actually try to remain true to what someone actually looks like? I don't know how that measure is going to happen. I still have lots of questions.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be challenging. And I think it's going to be challenging in a number of different ways, right? Because I think whenever we come to a realization as society, what we tend to find is we go from this extreme and the pendulum completely swings the other way. And then it takes us years to actually get to a middle ground of like, this is what we accept as reality. And I mean, I think we've always understood that different communities, different countries, different villages, depending on what they're exposed to, will perceive beauty in one way versus another way, right? Like in Europe, you're going to perceive beauty a completely different way than you would like in Sudan, for example. And for me, what I've actually found very interesting about living in a climate like South Africa, where obviously racial ideas and ideologies will always be a bit of our, undertone, is I remember I had to attend a debate, and I just started out my career as a speaker. And this woman actually, I remember being like, I feel the burn in my chest now. She actually fought me on the fact that I forgave and all these things and how the media had received me. Because she said to me at the time that the only reason I held relevance versus another woman in a township somewhere is because of my relation to whiteness. And she's like, yes, because white people will think you're attractive or you built like them or you fit so well into their societies. They want to listen to you. But if a woman coming from a village in, wherever, who's got your story, they're not going to want to listen. And I remember at the time I was so infuriated. I remember just like it just built up. But after a while, when I had a little bit of distance from it, then I started to really pay attention to how I moved through the world and the spaces I was welcomed into and the, platforms I was given. I mean, I won't say I completely agree with what she's saying because I don't believe it's 100% true. But do I think there's a grain of truth to it? I do believe so. I think, there are so many things that allow us to be perceived as either acceptable, beautiful, or whatever it is. And I almost wonder, is that the normal that we've been conditioned into, depending on what our media and countries tell us?
100%. I mean, I was about to start talking about things that I've seen in South Africa, but actually I'm going to turn to my own country where, in Mexico, I realized one of the moments that I realized how behind we were in terms of this sense of what we consider to be beautiful and normal was when Yalitza Aparicio was in this film nominated for an Oscar, and she herself was nominated. So she has what you could call, I suppose, indigenous features. And in Mexico, we are, in South Africa, you are racially segregated, but I would say in Mexico, we also are, because there is a look which I would consider to be simply indigenous communities. The people are incredibly not just racist, but just degrading. It will be something where people get upset, you know, and when this woman was able to go to the red carpet, I remember thinking, oh my God, a Mexican actress at the red carpet, right? And I started reading headlines in newspapers, started reading comments on social media. People were literally saying things like, how can this Indian woman make it to the Oscars? And I'm just going, what is your problem? But in our society, and I would extend to say that many others across Latin America, it is perfectly acceptable to think that certain sectors of society belong in certain places, and they will never be normal, and they will never be appreciated. And when she was placed in the cover of Vogue magazine, that's when I went, this has to happen more. The notion that we still look at it and go like, oh my God, that's so amazing that they put her in Vogue. Why are we even referencing the notion that it's amazing? Why isn't it just normal that diverse people are placed on covers of magazines, especially beauty magazines? They have a massive role in determining what we perceive to be beautiful, because this is what people are consuming, right? I'm going to pass the mic because I get...
No. No, I was listening to everything you were saying, and I really, really resonate, because I think, you know, for me, I come from a mixed race mother. So she's very, like, she's a lot lighter than I am. She's got different skin tone. She's got different hair texture, everything. And I remember growing up as a young girl, and I was very dark. And I remember walking into a store with my mom, and like this grown adult said to me, like, my mom was trying on shoes or something, and she, you know, she was one of the store people, and she sat next to me, and she said, wow, your mother's so beautiful. And I was like, yeah, you know, my mom would get attention everywhere we went. And so she said, your mom is so beautiful. Maybe if you're lucky, someday you might look like her. You know, and I thought to myself, you know, I'm looking at my skin tone where I am currently, and I'm looking at this woman, I'm like, there's no amount of aging lady that's going to turn me into my mother. Like, it's not going to happen. And so I had such terrible self-esteem growing up, because I never saw people that looked like me in the media. I never saw dark women. I never saw, you know, black women really, like, very well represented, that didn't look like Halle Berry, whose colorism is a huge thing in black communities. Like, so the woman I saw represented in the leading lady role, in the role of being beautiful, getting the ad campaigns, besides Naomi Campbell, who was probably the only woman I can reference who looked like me in some way, everyone else was so light. Everyone else was like, you know, this is what you look like when you want to be a leading lady. And that messes with your mind, because then you look at Naomi Campbell and you look at Iman, and you can objectively just look at these women as they're very exotic, which is another term that is used for when you're not traditionally beautiful. You exotic looking.
Yes.
Oh, if I could just shoot myself every time someone said that to me. But it's like, you either exotic, so you've got to fit these exotic criteria in order for us to consider you beautiful, or you have to become an Alec Weck, who they're like, she's so different, she's beautiful, right? And so when you are just a young woman, black, you don't know where the hell you fit in. You're like, holy crap. So I'm either going to have to look like Naomi Campbell or Iman, who are these gorgeous just statues, you know, of women, or I just don't fit into the realms of what society considers beautiful. And I think it took me getting into my, like, I'm now 29, but getting into my mid to late 20s to actually just start accepting myself. So what you're talking about, representation, is so powerful, because if we don't see it being acknowledged out there, whether we want to say the media doesn't dictate my life, whatever, if you don't see it being presented on your screens, in your, you know, classrooms, in, you know, in front of you, you're not going to perceive it as beautiful. That's just not how our minds work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's almost interesting to me, and I almost like want to be very cautious about how I ask you this question. But you classify yourself as a Latin woman, but you come across as very white, right? Like, you can pass as white in the world. And I almost want to know, like, what is that lived experience like?
It's weird, because I have to be honest. I mean, growing up in Mexico, my dad is, you know, Canadian, so he was very fair-skinned. My mom was a little bit darker, but she wasn't super, super dark. So I came out fairly light. And I came out with light eyes as well. And I remember, you know, even growing up in Mexico, going to markets, people would immediately say to me, oh, $5, $5. and I'd have to start speaking in Spanish and being like, no, dude, I'm Mexican. Like 5 pesos, 5 pesos. So even in that, they always call me güerita, which is like, you know, blonde, which, okay, this is like dyed, but my hair tone is this, right? So the notion that I would grow up and they'd call me blondie, blondie, everywhere I went, I was blondie, right? So, and you do get treated differently. I felt like I was treated with more benefits than other children my age, even within my own family. But especially, you know, when you went out on school trips or whatever, you would get preferential treatment. I would. And it was very uncomfortable. I don't want to be that, you know, girl that's like, oh my God, I got preferential treatment. But as a child, you actually feel strange, because I don't think as a child you see society broken down in the way that as adults you understand, oh, this is why. So you don't understand why somebody's sequentially being sometimes discriminated against and you're not. And it's freaking bizarre. One of the things that I found really strange when I was working and traveling a lot is all over Asia and Africa, in every country I went to, I have to say, you go into buy creams or whatever, and there'll be a section for skin whitening creams that will be like, you know, over the course of many months, your skin will be lighter. And they'll have photographs of Black women, and this cream will actually come on and look freaking bizarre. Like you can actually see where the cream is because it's so light, and where the rest of their skin, even in the photograph, continues. And this is perceived as something to aspire to. And God, I just felt every time I went to these shops, I'd always like, if it was a small one, I'd go to the lady like, do you like this? Like, do you start a conversation? Because what is going on, right? I mean, same in Mexico, same in Latin America, is we are treated differently. And that's got to change. I mean, it's hard to say how, but I think the first step is that we need to be discussing the fact that it exists and how wrong it is, because obviously people that are discriminated against will not have the same leverage, right? Because they are not being listened to in the way that they should, right?
And I think, you know, you and I will definitely have to have like another conversation just on colorism alone, because that is such a, no, it really is, right? It's this strange notion of being a woman of color and being classed by your own racial group into these divisions of, you know, superiority and inferiority. And obviously we can't even touch India because there's a whole caste system there. But you know what I actually find very bizarre when I started traveling, right? Because in South Africa, I almost had an acceptance. I was like, okay, fine, you know, I don't look South African, whatever the hell that means, because it was just something I was told repetitively by my Black friends. I wasn't Black enough to be in the Black crowd, you know, and I'm like, look at my skin. But I wasn't Black enough to be Black, and I wasn't colored enough to be colored. And so I was always living in this strange little bubble of like nowhere, no man's land, right? And so I thought to myself, when I travel, that's when I'm going to fit in, because everyone would be like, you look like you could be from New York. You look like you could be from here. You know, people just throw out random cities. That's what I've started to find. But anyway, so then I started traveling and I got to New York, and immediately they were like, you're definitely not a New Yorker. They're like, you're very different. You're very cute. We like you, but you're definitely not from here. Where the hell are you from? And then I got to London, and almost the same reaction, you know, like, where people would literally, but also I've got a very edgy style, so I kind of get like I elicit a reaction from people. But people immediately, the first thing they say to me is, where you from? You know, like not what's your name, how you doing, da, 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 where you from? And that's before I even started speaking.
Couldn't be local.
So I can't even blame. Yeah, I couldn't dare. And so it's funny because I'm now hosting these seminars online for another company. And so my co-host, you know, was just joking and said, yeah, you know, like someone said Candice looks like they're from Somalia. And when I say chats just started coming in of everyone disputing what my race was. No, she looks like she could be Nicaraguan. And they threw out names that I've never even seen. And I'm like, thank you. I am a global citizen. But I just find it interesting that as human beings, right, when someone doesn't fit the mold of what we perceive as traditional beauty, right, and that's kind of the point I'm making here, is I don't fit the point of like traditional beauty, blonde, blue eyes, whatever, or, you know, whatever it looks like to be a Black woman, colored woman, Indian woman, whatever. But they like, she's interesting enough to be like classified as something. And the first thing we look at is like, what class of people can we put her in so that our brains can comprehend that this thing that doesn't look like what we used to needs to make sense. And that's what I'm kind of struggling with when they're saying they're going to go norm, like they're going to remove normal and they're going to start catering to a white. What does that look like? You know, are we casting normal, like what normal women? And by casting normal women, are we actually alluding to the fact that these women aren't traditionally beautiful? Therefore, they can be like this very baseline monotone look. You know, I just think it's a very dangerous, you know, that's the thing with society right now. I'm kind of finding that so many things are changing. And some of them I'm like, I'm kind of holding my breath because I don't know what the hell it's going to look like, right? Because if you go into a store and you look at this woman who, like, you know, they're like, she's what, you know, you're aspiring to, and she just looks like, you know, your neighbor. Are you going to buy the product necessarily? Because when we buy product, what we're looking for is essentially aspirational, right? When we buy face products, makeup products, whatever, we're looking to aspire, we're looking to dream. And therefore, I'd almost say that fashion and the fashion world in many ways has been a dreamland. It has been a way to break free and say, I aspire to this. And I'm almost scared that we erring on the side of removing all the fantasy that human beings have, which is almost a part of the enjoyment. I don't know. What do you think? Am
No,
I making
yeah,
sense?
and having all of our, I think diversity, I mean, the more people mix, you know, I think the more beautiful we become as people, I find. Like I've seen, I think National Geographic did like, you know, by 2050 or something, this is what we forecast humanity to look like. And it's so like this toasty skin and this beautiful curls and things. And I'm just going, that is gorgeous. And the notion that it's still, like you said, the word exotic, it's classified as exotic. And you know, I think for too long we've been all within the fashion circles aspiring to becoming things we can never be. I am never going to be a hugely tall woman. I am short. I am hippie, and this is what it is. I'm short and hippie. I'm never going to be tall and super skinny. It's just not going to happen. And the notion that we have to have all these surgeries and all these things to aspire to be beautiful. So we don't go through all these things. We're just not beautiful. And, you know, we're cool. We might be really nice people. We might be worth listening to, maybe, but you're just not going to be the standard of beauty.
Can I throw in a spanner in the works there almost? I actually think that it's not fashion that needs to necessarily change. I think the fashion industry can stay the same with more diversity. I think diversity has to be a thing. Like we can't only see like 2 Black models, 1 Indian, and a like runway of just like, you know, blonde, blue-eyed girls. No, it needs to be diversified. But what it is in nature, I think it is illusionary. I think it's like making a movie. Like movies cannot just start incorporating everyone, or else it becomes real life. We don't want real life. We watch movies to escape, so that's fine. But what I actually find almost being more dangerous is the Instagram culture of influence. So what I'm seeing, or at least from my perspective, and please correct me if I'm wrong from your experience, is all these young girls almost getting these injections in their lips, and everyone's lips are puckering up until here, and everyone's wearing the same clothes, and everyone's doing the same makeup, and everyone's just morphing into this one human being. Then I'm like, but why are you doing that? Like, that is so boring. That is so terrible. Sorry.
No,
I mean, you do you,
no,
if
but
it makes you feel good.
filters, the thing that I've seen the most is the filters that remove any single you know, skin mark, any, like we all look Botoxed like at 10 years old, right? Yeah, and it's and the massive eyelashes and the sparkles here, because if my cheekbones don't naturally sparkle when I smile, I can't be beautiful. So I find that very scary because it's beyond aspirational. It's actually it's by nature telling you you are not beautiful as you are. Unless you put this filter on, you can't face society. You can't dare put yourself in a circumstance where you're just, you know, looking a bit like crap, because that's not beauty, and therefore you're ugly. And what we're creating is a generation with the worst self-esteem probably ever. And let's not forget that historically humanity has always aspired to bizarre, in my mind, bizarre beauty standards. Like I remember in ancient China, I don't even know how long ago, when feet binding used to happen, right? Because women with small feet would be perceived as beautiful. And I think in some places it still happens. And in certain cultures, there are the women with a big metal necklace that stab. And then you end up having, you know, to the point where they have said if you cut that open, they could not hold their head up because their neck muscles are unable to actually hold that weight anymore. So we do aspire to bizarre beauty standards and bizarre traditions, but the scariest one at the moment is one that's being imposed on a mass scale globally and to young people that are fearing facing the world as they are. And I think that is something that is really damaging, and no wonder suicide rates are so high, and no wonder everybody and their parakeet needs antidepressants and psychologists and help, right? Because I think we all have a collective responsibility to change this.
And it made me remember that I was actually watching a plastic surgeon, Beverly Hills plastic surgeon, and he actually said something that I found so interesting. He said before, when he started his practice, people would come to him with a picture of Kim Kardashian, a picture of whoever, and say, make me look like this, right? And he says, and now what people do is they come to him with a filtered picture of themselves and say, make me look like this. And I thought, whoa, isn't that insane? Isn't that insane that now we want to look like these hyper, filtered versions of ourselves? And you almost become so self-conscious, as you're saying, to be like, okay, I can't post this picture because it isn't taken with this particular filter. And I almost started to think of what it's going to do to the generations to come, what it's already doing to the generations that are. Because if you're sending a dude, let's say, because now we're all meeting virtually in some way, you're sending a guy a picture of yourself, and the first thing he sees when he sees you is like, that is not you. Like, I get it's you, but it's not you. And then it further reinforces the fact that me's not good enough. So you start over filtering even more, and then it starts getting into the cycle. And I think we're in a lot of trouble. And I almost think Unilever is on the right track to a certain degree, but I think that we've got a bigger problem than beauty brands and beauty products and fashion labels doing that. I think they need to be more inclusive, like I said, but I think more so we need to start actually monitoring social media, because everything comes across as so innocent. But I think it's when we look back in the future and say, when did we actually get messed up as a society? And I think this is the era and the time that we'd be looking at, I think.
100%. And as always, this conversation goes on forever and we can carry it on forever. But guys, we would love to hear more about your opinions on what Unilever is doing. What more could we do as, individuals in our day-to-day social media to fight this situation, which is creating generations of poor self-esteem and self-deprecating feelings? And if you have any ideas for topics that you would like for us to cover in subsequent episodes, do drop us a note. Hope you have an excellent week, and we look forward to chatting to you again next week. Bye.